Hello, hello, everybody.
Hello.
Presumably.
Presumably.
Live.
I mean,
It hasn't been for us yet, but
Think
apparently
we're
we're
live.
live.
Caught up, but hello.
We'll see.
Right,
It'll take a
where's-
second. Oh, yeah.
There
well,
we go.
We're good.
Oh, hello.
Oh, mine's behind.
Oh, Gabby says hello.
Hello, everybody. Yes.
Hello, Gabby.
Presumably.
Presumably.
Live.
I mean,
It
it
hasn't been for us yet,
who
but apparently we're live.
doesn't have the stream muted? It's still going.
Let's
Who hasn't muted the stream?
It's Chris.
Chris just muted himself.
The
Chris!
Facebook stream, not Discord.
Oh.
Mute Facebook. Ah.
So this stream has started off absolutely fantastically.
We're good, guys. We're doing
Absolutely
good.
no technical difficulties here.
We are professional.
Yes. Oh gosh.
How is everyone doing this fine lockdown?
This is why I do fantasy and not sci-fi, because I don't get
Really?
science.
Everyone say happy birthday to
keep
Bartholomew.
It's his
Happy
birthday.
birthday to you.
We have
my
19
God.
people, including all of us, I presume.
Yeah.
As long as all of us are watching, but yeah. Oh, 21. Oh, we're getting there.
My goodness, we're so popular, guys.
Happy Saturday,
I'm
everyone.
having friends.
You guys ready for a fun Q&A?
Yeah, boy.
Hooray.
Start.
As far as
Second-
topics, we haven't really ruled anything out, have we?
No,
So-
we haven't.
No.
I basically said if you've got questions about the lore, questions about the rules, questions about particular games, weekenders, anything that's Scy'kadia related, go
Uh-oh,
nuts.
what's Lynn done?
What has Lynn posted?
Um,
Yeah,
Lynn, what have
start
you
commenting
done?
questions now if you have questions, so that we have
yeah,
questions.
because it'll take a little
Otherwise,
bit.
we will just banter until something.
Yeah, because we've
will be
got
all
something like a however long delay, like 15-second-ish delay, so it's...
Yeah.
And I promise, not all the banter is going to be gold.
No,
Definitely
most
not.
of it will
We're not
probably
that
be
funny.
bad.
If the first 20 seconds of this stream are anything to go by, it's going to be messy.
I don't know what you're talking about. It's wonderful.
No, we're doing great, guys. We're doing great.
Well, there's a good question. I mean, I'll leave it to really the rest of the team if they've had any ideas. But in the past, our October weekenders have been
No.
less of a complex plot than they have been sort of an extended regular game. That's not always the case, though. So, team, have you folks been
I have
thinking
been
hard about
so
October?
busy that I have not thought about anything.
We
Same.
have had a few ideas though,
Mm.
which I don't want to spoil things here, but
Spoilers.
Also, Game 100 is coming up.
it is,
So-
yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. It
That's
was going to land in
exciting.
August, but with the cancellations we've had at the start of this year, it might be a little bit later than August. It might land around October though, so you know.
So it'll be,
Yeah, Des, it would absolutely be Korea and Flex. I mean, Korea's got a full military behind them, so...
Yeah, Korea, like that's a whole country versus like
country.
3 people.
Yeah.
So Lynn has asked, name your favorite realm and tell me why. Let's go.
Oh.
What way should we go? How should we answer questions that are directed to all of us instead of all talking all over each other?
Go around by Discord. Addie's first because that's their first
Addie
on my
first.
screen.
I
Yeah.
was going to suggest that, but I didn't want to suggest that because it would mean that I would be like, hey, I'll go first.
You can go first.
Well, okay. Favorite realm. So, take a
gonna
wild
be?
guess.
I
Number
Probably
one,
the same as
Kraken
mine.
Reach Isles. Kraken Reach Isles. Number 2, Mureth. Just because I think the aesthetic and everything is dope as hell, and I really like pirates. In case you had not already guessed that by now. Also, fantasy pirates are really cool. Real life pirates are not necessarily as cool because they were murderers and stuff, but
Well,
fantasy pirates are dope as hell.
some
Also
real life
murderers and
pirates were
stuff.
pretty cool.
Oh, some real life pirates were dope,
I can
but
never
also
remember a
there was a
name.
lot of murder and
Well, there's-
and screwing with people who, but also down with the monarchy. So, you know.
Well, there was a really cool Chinese pirate, and she became like a military leader and did all this really cool stuff. I can't remember her name off the top of my head, but
I
Can
think,
I?
yeah,
she was like
I think
Mulan
I've
of the
heard
Seas.
of
It
her.
was really cool. So if anyone who's interested in that, go check it out.
Staying on topic.
Yes.
Am I next?
Yes.
Okay, cool. This is bad because I don't know. That's not where I am on my screen, Becky.
Look,
Although that, oh no,
I
that's
have
where,
it, like,
where I am on
vertical
the
on my
live.
screen. I'm just gonna put on screen. There.
Oh gosh, a hard question that I don't know how to answer because I don't have a favorite. I don't know. Come back to me. Come back to me.
Amelia?
Millie.
So you could have a guess, but you'd be wrong. It's not the fairing like you're all thinking. My favorite realm is actually Loquai. There's a lot of fun there. You can do a lot. Secondly, would probably be Frail, but more specifically Jungle of Claws. I think it's probably the least represented in our games, and I think there's a lot you can do down there.
Oh yeah.
Are we going in a circle, which means that you're next, Chris?
Actually.
Circle.
Yes.
We
Circles.
are.
I know all about them.
Clockwise.
Yeah, for me it changes just based on my mood, but I also like Frail. I'm a big fan of like sort of Middle Eastern ancient history and that kind of stuff, and I think there's yeah, again, they're not as represented as some of the other realms. Frailite. I think Maphatepsis is a really cool city. Like in my mind, it's basically the greatest city in Scy'kadia. And just doesn't have that reputation because, you know, Arcosians and Thadians don't care much about other people.
Propaganda.
Jove has always wanted to go there, you know, more than any other sort of spot on the earth. But then also, I'm a big fan of a lost kingdom called Felkog, which is part of the history of the Thunder Peaks. Basically, there's
Don't know what that is. Read the lore, nerds.
But in essence, it's a bunch of human villagers who got together to make a kingdom, and they wanted to retake Grengulak, which is a sort of now an orc fortress in the Thunder Peaks. And in the process, they failed miserably, and then, like, generations later, reformed their little kingdom again, only this time got lost in the mountains and ended up fighting the dwarves instead. And it's basically just pure comedy, the whole thing. And like they're badasses, but at the same time, yeah, they just don't know what they're doing at all. And so now in the lore it says the name Felkog amongst all those villagers has been intentionally forgotten. So just you know, so they don't go and screw themselves again.
I'm gonna butt back in because I've decided on mine.
My turn. Mine's probably a tie between Kraken Reach Isles and Greenfang Forest, just because I don't know, I have so much sentimental value in both of those because of playing Nehrin for so long. But I am obsessed with Pirates of the Caribbean and like fantasy pirates who are doing like magic on pirate ships and all that stuff, and then just the Kraken in general. I really like it. If you didn't know.
The Happy Love Squid.
Happy Love
Happy
Squid.
Love
And
Squid.
Greenfang just I always love like Lothlorien. I was obsessed with like reading Lord of the Rings growing up, and I love that whole elves in the woods and like the I don't know how to pronounce the capital city, which I should know, but I don't. But just read about it in the wiki. It sounds really cool.
My favorite
Desmond-
is
that's
also
right.
Greenfang because also sentimental because that was where Arca was from.
Arca.
And
F's in chat for
them.
Arca.
I don't think many people would remember Arca now. But yeah, no, I love the kind of just the magical vibes. I was never a big fan of Lothlorien, but I like magic forests at the same time. So, you know.
They're pretty good. Magic Forest, pretty good.
Cool.
Desmond wants to know who would win in a fight: Jove, Pandora, and Cass versus Korean and Flax.
Well, we already answered this. It's got to be Korea.
Yeah, Korea.
They got a whole army behind them.
Wait,
And
North or
honestly-
South?
Well, it just says
Yes.
Korea, so maybe both.
Both.
Yeah.
It'd be pretty spicy.
Do you think
But I do reckon Corin and Flax would
forget their
win.
differences and join up?
I mean, in spelling jokes aside, Corin and Flax are both literal demigods.
Yeah, they would
So-
absolutely win.
Pandora
Although I reckon Pandora would give them a run for their money.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, but she'd also run away. She's not been involved in that, nah.
Okay, you two. Wait, where? What?
Pandora's like
Joel-
a vanished blink. I'm gone.
Joel asks,
Um,
Mureth is a city-state, but are there... Sorry, I'm just trying to keep, because there's
Yeah.
going to be so many questions, so I'm just going to try and keep us moving. Mureth is a city-state, but are there any surrounding towns or villages that fall under its control or influence?
Yes. Not so much on the mainland, but yeah, to my mind, there are villages and I guess you could say because Mureth's pretty self-sustaining when it gets down to it, so they do have access to farms and things like that. It's just that almost everything they do is very compact. Like, they're a very small nation, so when you're talking I kind of imagine the majority of the island is just nature, and then
Now I just imagined Mureth, and there's a bunch of little small islands. Like Mureth eats them up, like Mortal Engine style.
it just drifts around, and it's making its way to the Kraken Reach one day.
One day it will be ours.
Oh no. Yeah, no, they again, there are little towns and villages and whatnot, but you also have to remember that they need to be, what's the best way to put it? I'm struggling to find the right words for it. Because the island submerges every couple of generations when there's a threat that they can't open fight, everything is built in such a way that they have to be able to abandon some stuff and then sort of hold up in the few locations they have that seal. So a village might be based around a town center that can be sealed against the ocean, and then everything else around it will sometimes be gone. It's not a foolproof magical system, the whole sinking thing. So the city is the part that will stand whenever there's trouble. Yeah.
Lynn says, question for the whole team. During your time at Scy'kadia as a player or admin, what has been a big highlight for you or your favorite memory?
Please answer in height order.
Bort would go last because Bort is tiny.
Bort's
You're
small.
absolutely wrong. We discussed this.
So it'd be Chris,
We've
Chris then
discussed
Bort.
this.
Only just.
Chris,
Yeah, but
Bort, me, and then I think it'd be
Becky and
is it
Addie
paper
are
rock
the
and
same
Beckett?
height.
I
Addie are
think
the same height.
8 centimeter taller than me.
I can't remember. We
So-
figured this out ages ago.
Yeah,
Are
one
we
of us
going
is, like,
from
slightly
are we
taller than
going
the
from
other, and I
shortest to
can't remember who.
tallest or tallest to
Yes,
shortest?
shortest to tall. Yes, shortest first.
Shortest first.
But we
Addison.
just had this discussion that we can't remember which one is shortest.
So
Okay.
it's
well-
Addie. Bam.
It's Addie.
Centimeter tall. Addie.
Okay.
I have a hat on for extra height.
Oh gosh, a big highlight for you or your favorite memory? That's going to be quite difficult. I can't say that there's really one specific thing that stands out in my mind. It's more just the smaller moments where I realized that I've kind of made an impact, I guess. For example, when I killed off Kasan, and the number of people that were, in Discord, talking about the in character influence that is had, and out of character talking about how much fun they had with him and everything, and just kind of basically just whenever I get to see that I've made my mark and that that I have been able to influence people's gameplay in a positive way. And it like that example was from when I was an admin, but like even as a player, like when I was playing Erembor, like when people would, say stuff and roleplay stuff of like how Erembor impacted them, and it's just really special, all those little moments of like people, yeah, just seeing how I've affected the game in general.
Becky.
Me. I think, as a lot of you know, I didn't live in Sydney for a fair chunk of time, and so I was only coming to games every like 3 months. But I was still I was captain of the Kraken, and it was such just a wonderful feeling when I'd be away for ages and I'd come back, and it would be right back to everyone being like, Captain, Priestess, and I'd heard cats, and it was terrible, and the circle is so much easier. But it was such a, I don't know, a really wonderful and validating thing that I could be gone and come back, and there was this amazing group of pirates who would follow me into the stupidest situations, and it was, yeah, that's still really special to me, and I do miss that a lot. Pandora's fun. I'm not saying that, but like it was very special to me when I got to come back and it'd be straight back to, well, there's our captain. We need to do what she wants, I guess. And that was good. I really love that.
Anya.
Much love to Kraken.
Who's next tallest?
Me.
Millie.
Millie.
Been a lot of fun moments, but I think the most enjoyable moment was during the game with the Life of Jove. That was an interesting game, and I honestly don't remember what quest we were given by Solace, but it was immediately forgotten as soon as we got the Life of Jove in our hands. It's probably for the best, everybody, that Eleanor and I aren't at games together anymore. Because when you put those two stupid Warlord Elementari together, just stuff happens. Just ask Emily about what their name is in character. Disaster Twins. That was probably the funnest moment, and then sort of breaking two poor agrarians' heads when we tried to find a tree healer to repair the Life of Jove.
I've still got a copy of that script on my laptop. Actually, it's awful.
We didn't read it. We just had the Life of Jove in our hands, and we had to return it.
Oh God.
Yeah. So yes, that was an enjoyable game, and we confused a lot of people, which was ultimately our goal.
Cool.
My favorite moment, I think, is a breakdown of two Arca moments. One being serious and one being ridiculous. The serious one was when the agrarians all got captured by Shadow and tortured, and then Atticus got sacrificed, and Arca had a breakdown. But it was some of the most fun RP I've been involved in, like, ever. And like, it was so great. And then the second one was at a weekender when Aelon had a drinking contest with the Sentinel and managed to win, but was wasted. This was all in character, by the way. Drink safely. And then one of the I guess bad things about it was that he had double the chance to heal him and double to revive him, and Arca was the healer in the agrarian, so I was running around after an extremely drunk Aelon for about half an hour trying my hardest to heal him while he couldn't remember any of our names and was just running around attacking the first thing he saw, and it was so funny. And I had a great time.
Cool.
Was that everybody?
No, it's Chris.
Chris.
I know it's hard to remember that I'm not actually the tallest
Not even
admin,
matters.
but
You're important.
My answer is very similar to Addie's. I really like because I don't get much of a chance to role play realistically, like in game when we're sort of running things instead of being a part of things. I don't have too many like character moments to fall back on. I have one that comes to mind from recent events, but I really like watching players. They're sort of finding themselves a place in the community. Like there's just moments where, like, even when we have to cancel a game, you see people get legitimately upset about it instead of just thinking, oh well, and it's
You hear that, guys? Chris likes making you upset.
You heard it here first.
Chris wants to make you cry.
yeah, COVID was an inside job. It was my fault. All just to upset people. But it's just you see players legitimately caring about the product and their place in it. And I really like seeing the stories from various, especially new players who come in and they've actually delved into the lore and found some connection to it that they then use. And it's just good watching that process. But as far as in-character moments, I had a really lovely moment recently just before Joe turned into an owl, where some characters had been sort of manipulated into slipping him a potion, thinking probably that it was it was left with instructions that looked like they'd been written by Cass, essentially, and that was done on purpose. And so you could see in their eyes the look of glee when I drank the potion, and then as he started to legitimately look like he was now dying, you saw people like legitimately well up in tears, like, oh my god, I've made a horrible mistake. And it was just a really nice 15-20 minutes of dealing with all the emotions surrounding that choice. And then when he turned into the owl, all the shenanigans that came afterwards, it was, even though I couldn't be involved because I was a stuffed owl, it was still nice watching people, just dealing with the ramifications of that. Yeah, that's me.
Lightless owl.
This is a quick one. Matthew asks, could a group of player characters go and reform that lost village that we were chatting about earlier? Technically, I guess they could, but they'd have to, if they want to restart a village, you kind of got to stay there to make sure to lead the village and to make sure it doesn't collapse and everything. So you certainly could go and do that, but roleplay wise, it would mean it would give your character very little reason to come back to game. To come
roleplay
back
wise,
to
get ready to retire your character.
As soon as you leave, though,
that is, your character could have that as a goal, as something that they want to come to the Weft, get rich, get some friends, and then one day return to try and reclaim Grengulak. Like that's definitely a great character motivation. But as for, you couldn't do it in game, essentially. And we try, as we say with things like Discord, that's all supplementary to the game. So if you have in your head canon that you've gone and done it, it's not really going to matter to anyone because it's happening all off screen and no one else is involved.
It'd be a fun and interesting way to retire your character, though. Yeah.
Exactly.
Gabe asks, question. The dragons we know in Cycadia are often represented in a way reminiscent of Western-inspired Smaug-esque monsters. Are there any dragon-like creatures that share traits with dragons in Eastern mythology? Yes. Absolutely yes. 100%. I love dragons. I have you remember those books that were like Egyptology and vampirology? I have dragonology and I have like the spin-off like type dragons and everything. I love dragons, so I am absolutely, I don't care what Chris says as the creator of the lore and everything. I am putting every dragon in there. Dragons are dope.
And this is why Kassan's actually the dragon.
There's actually, for those who are interested in that, in the Loquay little extended history, read about Khmer Yatel and the, I think, 77 Tiger Caste mages that sacrificed themselves to it, and how the dragon mysteriously never came back when it said it would. Yeah, so there's definitely Eastern dragon mythology worked into the setting. Yeah, they're just not as common as
Are
the big
dragons
old
good or bad,
scaly
Chris?
lizards. Sorry?
Dragons good or bad was a addendum to that question from Lynn.
Oh, bad. There's it's very Tolkien in that they are evil spirits in like they're evil magical spirits in the form of giant fire-breathing lizards. So yeah, there's never
There's
been
no
a case.
Parthenaxes here either. Of
Yeah,
overcoming your evil nature through great effort.
There is
Yeah.
no Puff the Magic Dragon.
even the fact that Mireth has a dragon for their sigil, other nations look at that as kind of like a almost like a like a bad joke more than anything. They're like it's not that they're saying like, oh, we love dragons. It's more like they're saying, like we are as dangerous as one of these things, come at us. It's yeah. No, there's never been a case in Cycadian history where someone proved that a dragon was a good guy, essentially.
Very nasty.
Yeah.
Very, very nasty.
Lynn
That's
asks,
why people think that Ashbourne are so insane,
Lynn asks, okay, we have so many comments to get through, so I think we gotta to try and catch up. Question for the whole team, please answer in alphabetical order of character name. What do you wish you'd known about LARP before you started? Who's
I don't.
first?
It would be,
Flax.
no, it would be you.
Me.
Kassan. It's
Flax.
Kassan. No, the Arcanist. Wait, no,
ABC.
you're Pandora.
Name
Wait,
Pandora.
Kassan.
Kassan. Okay.
Mhm.
What do I wish I'd known about LARP before you started?
Just reveal that we don't know the alphabet.
I don't super know what I wish I'd known, because when I started LARPing, I really liked the process that I went through of learning about how it all worked. Like, for me, that was one of the things that I enjoyed about LARP when I was first starting, just like learning about it all. What I wish I'd known, probably that I am not the main character. That, and it says it in the all the rules documents and everything, and it's reiterated at new player training and everything, but it didn't really click, I guess, when I'd come up with this tragic backstory for Kassan and everything, because Kassan was my first character. I'd come up with this tragic backstory and everything, and no one really cared. And I don't say that in no one cares about me or my character or anything, but more just people weren't going out of their way to learn everything about me, and if that makes sense. I had this character and this backstory and everything, but I wasn't people's priority, I guess, if that makes sense.
30. Flax.
F for flax.
F for flax.
Yeah, I mean, similar thing to Addie, I think. I personally, there's nothing that I'd go back and tell myself, because I'm I kind of like that I came into LARP not knowing much and just kind of vibing. But yeah, same thing in that I'm not the main character, and it's such a big game. There are so many people who want to advance their own character that people aren't necessarily going to go out of their way to unlock your character's tragic backstory. In your first couple games, maybe if you build up rapport with people for ages and you guys build up a big character arc, then that's going to happen. But you can't expect to, I came into the game as Edgy McEdgerson as Charybdis, and was oh yeah, I'm gonna sit in a dark corner, and people are gonna be, oh, who's sitting in the dark corner? No one cares.
They just
who's
be
sitting in the dark
okay,
corner.
someone's sitting in the dark corner. Clearly, they don't want to be interacted with.
They're gonna mark off another tally of how many dark corners the boar has, and then go about their day.
There's so many edgy corners in the circle.
So yeah, that's the only thing that I would have known, I think. But at the same time, I'm glad I had the learning experience the whole time.
Chris?
Jove.
Yeah, it's hard for me to answer that one because as a LARP player, Sorry?
Because you started it.
Well, yeah, with Scy'kadia I did, but prior to Scy'kadia was based on observances from some other LARPs I'd been involved with, particularly Clans of Elgar with Nathan and Luke, and I noticed things from that system and the behavior of players around me that heavily influenced the way that Scy'kadia was written, and then research into American and European LARPs and what I felt personally worked for the sake of the theatrical roleplay and what sort of bogs things down with a list of 1 million skills and points and all that kind of stuff. Like, it's to each their own, but yeah, Scy'kadia was already based on observances, and it's run pretty smoothly with a few hiccups here and there. But as a player, yeah, I'm really not sure. Like, getting into LARP for the first time, I think it would just boil down to, again, remembering that you're not the main character and your backstory is purely for your own motivation. If you do, again, if you get to spill it, great. If not, then great.
It's a good way of putting it. Like, it's for your own motivation, not for other people to learn about you.
Yeah, and I think as much as I've always sort of prided myself on putting other people's play first before mine, I do still feel that I could have done more of that when I first started. I was still trying to be at the forefront of stories and whatnot, and I would have just told myself not to care as much, and just come into it and have fun and look for opportunities to push other people forward. Yeah. Who next?
Okay, for Corin.
Yeah. So for me, when I started LARP, like I was reenacting at the time, and I had a bunch of people from that LARP that were going to Elgard at the time, and were trying to convince me to go. But I guess in my head, I'd had that preconception of like LARP from the 80s of like the nerdy kids wearing a cloak saying "fireball, fireball" over and over again. And yeah, and that kind of had that preconception made. So I kind of wish I knew what LARP was about earlier, and I would have come earlier. And I guess writing some key moments in your character's backstory that you can reference or you can play off, but also keeping it open enough that you can insert other moments into it and sort of build your character's backstory on the fly as the roleplay demands.
Yeah.
And
Pandora.
Okay. Read the lore before you go to your first game. I was so confused. Also, read more on the rule document than your class. Those are my two things. Because I'm a terrible example, and that's it.
And now you're running the damn thing. Who let you in?
Good, it was you.
Also, I just want to say, if the circle has many edgy corners, it's perfect because the circle has infinite sides and therefore infinite corners. So,
but also there's only 4 active players, so a square would work.
A square.
Okay.
Them fighting work.
What's the next question? Question for the whole team, and please answer.
No, we missed what happened to the 37th.
Wait, 37th? That got answered by Gabe. They're on Smoko.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a player-made faction, so that's best for not us to talk about. Like, ask someone who knows a bit more about that. And if it's cool with the rest of the team, I think we might skip some of Lynn's personal questions and go to some from the newer players about.
We can save Lynn's ones for question droughts.
Love you, Lynn.
We love you, Lynn. You ask good questions.
So Alexia asked, question for everyone: have you got any tips for new players looking to interact with more people in game? So like I was, all of us were really saying earlier about not being the main character. It's really good. Something that I see a lot of people kind of fall into a trap of is waiting for other people to interact with them. waiting for people to come up and, ask you to do stuff or ask you to go and do a thing or ask you about your interesting backstory or whatever. So I know this sounds really basic and probably a bit dumb, but the best thing you can do is be that person that goes and asks people to do stuff and goes and asks people about their tragic backstories and to just go and interact with people, because a lot of people are really willing to be asked that stuff and are really willing to get other people involved. Like, that's something I think is really beautiful about our community, is we're so welcoming to each other. So yeah, like I know it sounds real basic. How do I interact with more people? By going and interacting with them. That's really the best way, I think.
You're really stuck.
Like,
go ask the camp admins if they have something for you to do.
I
We'll always
have fetch
something.
quests for you.
Genuinely, my best advice is, and this is something that I got from Archer because he tells everyone, but walk around a little bit, get a lay of the land, and then pick a faction and go, hey, can I roll with you for the day? And see how it goes. Like, I think my second game, I sat down at the table and all of the Kraken were there. I was like, hey, mind if I sit with you? I don't really know anyone. And then
for some reason we
all
said
know
yes.
how that, well, we don't all know how that turned out, but all the Kraken know how that turned out. Like, your best bet is literally, see a group of people who you think your character might vibe with and say, hey, can I roll with you for a bit? And just see how it goes. And I don't think there's anyone in our community who would say, unless they have a really good in-character reason, like, we don't accept anyone unless you do a trial or whatever. Most people will say, yeah, go for it. Come along for the ride, see how you like it. Everyone is lovely and absolutely happy to welcome new players. So
FYI, go to the circle. Becky needs help.
Yes.
Hey, what about me?
Yes.
I sometimes say that, and not to say that everyone has to know the lore or anything before they come into the game. Like, we're very welcoming to people who have no idea what's going on. And we even have in-character reasons for why that makes sense, magical amnesia, based on entering the place. If that's the case and you don't come into the game with any information, that's great. Again, come to one of us and we'll make introductions for you based on, like, we'll say, what class are you? You'll say warrior. We'll go, I know some people who need one, But if you have had a chance to look into the lore, lead with why your character is there. So you think about it, like, the Weft is sort of like the Wild West. Like, people would travel there to colonize and find opportunities and gold and whatnot. So think about why your character would come to such a monster-infested hellhole. And then if it's, I'm fleeing from people, you can lead with that. You can say, like, to locals, like, haven't been any Arcosian patrols through here lately, have there? And they'll go, no, why? Should we worry about that? And already there you go, like, you're starting a conversation with people. Or if you're just there for work, again, just say that, put it right on the message board, soldier looking for work will fight for cheap, and people will go, oh, okay, and hunt you out. Especially if you say, like, oh, first day's work free, people will go, cool, an extra sword. Yeah.
So I've skipped down a little bit to, it's a Lynn question, but I think it's a good Lynn question, and I think we should answer it. What tips do you have for people who are at LARP who have never done any acting or improv? So that's
me.
I think, yeah.
That's a Millie question because I think the rest of us have all done acting.
Yeah.
Yes.
Some tips. I've never acted or improv before coming to LARP. I came from a nerdy background of playing D&D for a lot of years, and medieval reenactment, so I haven't had any formal or even informal improv or acting training. I guess any tips that I can offer won't be fantastic. It'll just be from my experience. But just always be willing to roll with whatever the conversation goes with. Even if it contradicts something in the background, just lie. Make something up on the spot. It doesn't have to be the truth. In fact, if it's your first game, just make something up. Don't be willing to sort of expose your entire backstory in one conversation. As long as the conversation keeps going, it'll usually lead to somewhere fun.
Yeah, also, like, if you're unsure about your acting ability, it's totally okay to make a character that is similar to you in real life. As long as you can differentiate in some way between you and your character for bleed's sake, it's totally fine to make a character who acts very similar to you and has similar motivations to you to make it easier for you. It's completely up to you.
That's 100% what I did with Kasan. I do have a lot of acting experience, but for my very first character, I very deliberately made a character who was very similar to me so that I could focus on getting used to the game and everything instead of trying to have this extra level of what would my character say, what would my character do.
When I started playing Nayrin, who was my first character, she's just me, but 2 years younger. That was how I've played her the entire time, and she went on a very different path to me, but like, when I started her, I was like, how would I be when I was 16, which is how old she was when I started. And I kind of went from there. And that was a really good way of kind of getting in the mindset without having to think too much about it.
I believe Nayrin survived.
I can't believe either.
Fun question. Oh,
I was gonna pick on the Lynn just asked great questions, but because it's great for new players who don't really know what they want to do. But is there something missing from the game that you'd like to see more of?
Yeah.
In terms of like, yeah, giving people some inspo for shit they might want to do.
Everyone's either an Arcosian or a Cambion, and it's boring. No, it's not. I'm not saying your character is boring, but there are a lot of Arcosians. There are a lot of Cambions because Cambions are just objectively cool.
That's true.
But yeah, if you want, like Lynn said, Ashbourne would be pretty cool. Hang on, come back to me. I need to think of a thing, and then
I was gonna say, maybe biased, but people who worship gods that aren't Balroth and Leander, they're like, no hate because they are canonically the most popular gods, but it is a whole pantheon, and come and give me some like twins worshippers, some Rillian. It'd be really funky if we had a Zorg worshipper come in and see how that went. I don't know.
Speaking of Zorg, I was going to say I'd like to see more dwarves and orcs.
Yeah,
true.
I love
I've thought of my answer.
The costuming opportunities for them are just brilliant, and just they're fun to play because they're both very belligerent races, and so if people are like in Lynn's stream, she was saying how to play a villain in a way that gives to other people. I mean, nothing better than playing a slightly villainous orc or a dwarf who's a good guy but is rude as hell, because people will just take the species and go, oh yeah, like they're not going to take as much offense as if you're a human and you go like, you suck. And it's like if a dwarf comes up and goes, you suck, you're like, ha ha ha, yeah. You would say that.
My things is I want to see more color, less black, and way less steampunk corsets.
Stop calling my camp out.
Yeah.
There are too many corsets, and corsets aren't even in the time frame of the setting that we use. Sorry.
Becky is a costume.
There are some things we ignore, particularly since it's so hard to get female body armor that fits properly and doesn't cost like $800.
Yeah.
But yeah. Let's
have an interesting costume. Sorry, Chris. If you want to have an interesting costume and look feminine, of course it's fun, but you look the same as everyone else. Just saying.
So my answer for this is more creative interpretations of like species and realm combos. For example, I absolutely love the idea of Mesoamerican orcs from like the Jungle of Claws or something. I think that'd be dope as hell. And I may be biased because I did make a D&D homebrew world with Mesoamerican orcs, but like, what can you do?
Well,
But
we've got
yeah, I think
the Islander inspired orcs down in the Saber Island
Polynesian orcs.
Yeah.
that you added into the
That was
lore, which was
really
cool as hell, with their red
Very much
tattoos
into
and everything.
inside.
Yeah, they're saber cats that they hunt with. Yeah,
I love it.
there's a lot of lore that doesn't get looked at.
A quick question from Gabe. If your camp, because I just think it's fun, if your camp had a theme or anthem, what would it be?
The Elements song.
The Elements song.
There's
Mine
hydrogen and helium and lithium and beryllium.
Yeah, okay.
Mine would be the Adventure Line theme from the Stanley Parable.
Mine is actually the same answer to Gabby's question, but it's Wonders by S.J. Tucker. Is Light Camp and Flex. Two birds with one stone. Millie?
I don't really listen to music, so I don't really have an answer to this question to either Ed or Gabby's question.
I've got a suggestion.
The greatest show in the world. Is that what it's called? Shit,
Oh,
the one you made me listen to.
Oh yeah,
No?
the greatest show on earth,
one.
the Evolution one by Nightwish. That's a pretty funky song. I like that one.
You guys, I'd just go with something by My Chemical Romance and would be set.
Yeah.
I have a
I would say
suggestion.
teenagers.
The orchestral version of Back in Black.
You know what? Maybe like Jewel of Fates.
Yep.
Nice.
Nice. Chris?
I don't know. I have no idea. We're so eclectic. I wish I had some cool thing I could drop, but
Yeah.
no. I think to anyone who thinks that Tavern Town would have a cool anthem, if you think you know what it is, please drop a comment under.
It's Can You Hear the
under-
People Sing from Les Mis.
Yeah.
Oh, you mean because people are constantly trying to like rebel?
Yeah, what about Tub Thumping by Chumbawamba?
Oh god.
That'd be
Following on from
Job's
that-
anthem. I get knocked down, but I get up again.
I get burnt down and then built up again, Michael said.
Addie, Gabby wanted to know if any of us have character playlists and what's the favorite song from said playlists.
I actually do have a character playlist. It's called Kasan Vibes. There's a lot of AC/DC and a lot of Ailstorm, unsurprisingly.
Who would have
Oh,
thought?
I'm shocked.
I think, I think my favorite, oh god, because a lot of the music in this playlist is just my favorite music. So are you asking what my favorite song in this playlist is, or what like song I think is like encapsulate the vibe of the playlist the most?
I know, Gabby.
I think
was the question?
Necromance and Dancin' by Bear Ghost is a wonderful song and everyone should vibe to it.
I'm gonna research that as soon as we're done here.
I have a playlist with Pandora, but most of it's like spoilers because you haven't really figured her out yet. But I mean, but like the only one I can think that isn't really spoilers is Brand New Day from what's it called? Oh, with Neil Patrick Harris.
Our AV guy
That's
just
a horrible
just said,
sing along blog.
we have a secret AV guy that y'all can't hear.
He's contributing.
He's whispering.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I already said mine. It's Wonders by S.J. Tucker, but also Apple Tree by Aurora.
I think
Wonderful
I've
too.
listened to every Aurora song that exists.
No, you haven't. I played
It was
my
a long
Flex
car
playlist
ride.
when Millie and I were driving back from the snow.
Yeah, my taste is eclectic. I don't really have a set song. It sort of changes. But recently, I've been listening to, I think, is it Send in the Archers? It's a female-led rock band, and they've got a song called Through Stars. again, something like that. I can't remember the title, but that's that gets me pretty hyped lately. Yeah. So next question.
I'm
I've
losing
skipped down
questions.
again because there's
Mine's
just
being
so
reset,
many.
and I've lost all the questions.
Oh
yeah,
no.
same.
It's
Okay, I've got another
just
Lynn
skip to
question
people
for
going,
us.
Dr. Horrible.
Yeah. Question for the team. Each of your camps has overarching themes and ideals. Can you tell us what they are and what actions characters can take to demonstrate they share those ideals? That's a good question, I reckon, for like new players and stuff, and for old players.
Yeah.
Who wants to start?
Around the circle again?
Sure.
Yeah.
So the clan is some would say chaos, but I really think the core of it is freedom. Freedom to do whatever the hell you want, even if it is blowing up the tavern or something. don't tell Chris. But I think doing whatever you want and not necessarily how do I put this? I did make like a list when I became the clan admin. I made like a list of everything I wanted it to represent and everything. Yeah, just kind of
Oh yeah, I have a list as well.
standing up. I do have. Maybe I should just look at the
I
list.
don't.
Skip me,
wrote
and
it
I'll
all
come
down.
back to it when I have my list.
Where's my
So,
notes at?
Camp of Light.
You go, you.
Yeah, I have a list. So I think that light is really just like, yes, with a good camp, but it is more just like the motivation to leave the world a better place than you found it. And that doesn't mean that you have to constantly be perfect all the time and that you can never do something that may be considered objectively bad. You know, a discussion I had with someone the other day where like I said, light camp is the nice camp as long as you're not a dickhead. And if you are, then, you know, you're not making the world a better place, so we may dunk on you, you know. But yeah, it's light camp is full of and so nice. Yeah, just it's about leaving the world a better place than you found it and doing your bit to you know, keep on what's the word, like pushing the will of the gods into the world. Yeah.
Found my list.
And stop helping Shadow Camp.
I've never helped Shadow Camp.
Oh, not you specifically. Some holy characters have done so in the past.
Give me the names.
Do the answer what it means? Maybe.
No, I'm gonna have to decline that. Okay.
Millie.
Yeah, so Shadow Camp's probably the easy to describe, because we've been around for a while. Basically, Shadow Camp is the camp of the cult of the Naga. We worship the Naga. That's our overall theme. If you're not a Naga worshipper, then you're kind of not welcome in my camp. Different thought. So that's sort of our overall theme. Contrary to popular opinion, we're not trying to kill everyone or to burn down the world. That will be dragons. The Naga want to rule over the world, and you can't rule over a husk and ashen corpse of a world. So we're out to dominate and to subjugate the peoples, not kill people.
How boring.
Christopher.
Oh, that's right. We're going circular. Well, Taverntown, when it was just 3 camps, was initially for the misfits who didn't worship the greater deities. So it was very nebulous. Now, with other choices available, it's really the people who care about the settlement. So it's people who value commerce and trade opportunities. Kind of.
Capitalist.
Kind of. It's not necessarily like the people who protect the township don't need to be all about the money. It's just they're the people who are like they're heroes for the common people living in the region. and whether they're good guys about it or bad guys about it, it's like a lot of my objectives focus on, okay, the townspeople are worried about this, we need to do this to help them feel better. Or, you know, someone in town got murdered the other day, we need to find out what did it, you know. And so it's becoming more of a focus on the settlement itself. So yeah, if your character has come here to start a new life, and they're willing to protect that, and you know the common people who provide for them, then that's the gist. You know, putting the little folk before deific concerns. I think.
Circle is seeking knowledge, and uncovering secrets. Basically, our gist is we want to learn stuff. It doesn't matter if it's good stuff or bad stuff. Good and bad is irrelevant. What matters is that we know stuff.
I drink and I know things.
It's the sort of thing that sometimes we can do things in the name of doing good, and sometimes we do things in the name of being bad. But it's always in the pursuit of knowledge. It's a very, very neutral standing, and it can be chaotic. It can be lawful. It changes depending on Pandora's whimsy. But yeah, it's if your character's just wanting to learn something, especially if they're wanting to learn something about themselves, or learn about magic, especially magic. But yeah, it's especially we have characters who come to Circle because they want to find a cure for a disease back home, which was the Rue clan we had through ages ago. Sadly departed. And then we have other characters who want a cure to being a shifter, want a cure to this, want a cure to that, and that's the reason their character comes to the Circle, because the Circle is a place of knowledge where you can genuinely find out stuff without having to do what big bad gods and stuff say.
So next question from Lynn, because we're running so behind on the questions that the comments are actually starting
Is
to
this
disappear.
the how can people get around the fact?
Appropriation one? Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you want to do that, and I'll seek out the next question.
So this is definitely a really important question because we have a lot of realms inspired by different cultures. So the question was, how can people get around the fact that they'd like to come from a place like, for example, Loquai, but aren't of Asian descent without cultural appropriation? So my main answer to this is do your research. Like, look up, can I, as a white person, wear a cheongsam or something like that? It's, you know, it can be as easy as that, and oftentimes there's lots of information on the internet as to what you can wear. Another resource that I would really recommend is a Facebook page called Larping in Color. It is a page specifically about being inclusive and making sure not to be racist or anything. It's run by people of color, like LARPers of color. It's a really wonderful resource. They post a bunch of resources about how to include people of color in your games and not to culturally appropriate and stuff. So I highly recommend you check out that page. The main thing, though, is ask questions. Go and find someone from that culture and say, hey, we have a realm, like, you know, I wanted to play a character inspired by this culture, but I want to make sure I'm not wearing it as a costume. How do you suggest I do that? Or just look it up on the internet.
Yeah, we've gotten emails from people being like, hey, I want to wear a headscarf or something as a Frailite character. I want to wear, you know, all these different things. And what we've done is we've actually like reached out to who like the Australian societies of that culture and asked them, you know, hey, here's our situation. What do you think about it? Like we've reached out to the people who talk about this stuff as their job.
Even tourism, like if you speak to the Japanese Tourism Council of Australia, they'll be more than happy to also help you if you wanted to.
Well, yeah, we've reached out to the Arab Society of Australia and the Japanese Society of Australia for Loquai and Frailite queries. And basically, as Bertie was saying before, Yeah, a lot of it is they just say, look, do your research. One really awesome thing that the Arab Society told us about playing like a Bedouin character is they said, look, there are stereotypes of Bedouin men, for example, being, the having like harems and drug addiction and all these other horrible things that you see in like really old school Western depictions. And they said basically, if you just go through and make sure that your character doesn't show any of that, then great. That it's there's nothing against having a Bedouin character.
A character, not a stereotype.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's not a caricature of the person. It's a genuine person.
And while we're answering this question, I also want to note that we are very aware that our team is made up entirely of white people. So while you can absolutely send us an email and say, how can I portray this character? What we're most likely going to do is just go and email Scy'kadia or something like that. So you may as well cut out the middleman and do your own research. And also take criticism. If you're wearing something and someone from that culture comes up to you and says, hey, actually, that's a really important symbol in my culture that only people of this rank can wear, please don't listen to them and don't do it.
All right. So Theo wants to know, what do you suggest for getting started in making costumes and LARPing stuff? My contribution before I look for another question is op shops.
Op shops.
Op shops.
Mm-hmm.
Op shops. Learn how to craft. It doesn't mean you have to grab a sewing machine. You don't have to do any of that. Learn how to use a hot glue gun. That will save you a heap of time.
Hot glue gun's all you need.
Not necessarily. Yeah. I do this professionally, so I don't use a hot glue gun anymore. But when you're starting, hot glue, you don't have to use real leather. You can use fake leather, which you can get, faux leather, which you can get at Spotlight. You can use fake stuff until you're at a point where you can get real stuff. Don't be afraid to glue stuff together. Don't be afraid to ask for help. 100%. And there's hundreds of videos on YouTube about how to craft stuff, how to make stuff. And there's plenty of people out there who are willing to give advice. If you need help sewing anything, message me. I am very happy to help you out. It's what I do for a job.
Layering.
Layering.
Yeah.
Layering.
Layers
no matter how basic the costume is, if you just got a
lifeline, they often have scarves will be like $5 for $5. Buy a bunch, wrap them around your waist, bam.
Bunch of belts.
Hat. Hats make you distinctive.
A tip that I have that I think really helps me is don't think about it as your costume. Think about it as your character's wardrobe. So me, for example, I'm using myself as an example because that's what I know. But me, for example, I have multiple pairs of pants and shirts and everything for Cass because he wouldn't just wear the one shirt and the one pair of pants every single day, because even in like fantasy medieval-ish pre-shower times, pre-washing machine times, that'd get pretty rank. So I have, I do have a wardrobe for my characters, and I do, like, you guys have probably seen me switch it up and wear a different coat or wear different layers, and layers really do help with that authentic feel. And something that I found, I go to a lot of conventions and stuff, and I used to cosplay, and when I went to conventions in cosplay, I never really got any like compliments or like people taking pictures or anything, no like comments on it or anything, because it looked like a costume. And then I wore my character's outfits to a convention. I dressed up as Cass for a convention, and people were like constantly stopping me, telling me like I look so good, look so like realistic and everything, because it wasn't a costume, it was what this character wears, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I can second that. As a cosplayer who sometimes goes to events in like my Nairon kit, which I have boxes of costume over there, and then I'll go the next day as like Gandalf or something. So many more people stop me when I'm Nairon than when I'm Gandalf, because it's a unique costume they haven't seen before. They're interested in it, and it makes you an interesting person to look at.
Is our stream paused? I'm just noticing there's not much movement on the Facebook tab I've got.
I'm
Have
good.
we caught up and all of the other questions were like people just commenting on stuff we were saying?
There was question. Okay, we've got a question from Ellie, which is, what's your favorite bit from the lore that's been added recently?
Ooh.
Since like January when we did the bit of a lore revamp.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Here's a test for you all.
Mine is the Polynesian Orcs. I think that they're amazing. Read about them; they're really cool. We did a bit of a revamp of Orcs and Fallen Elves at the beginning. Actually, yes, the golden Fallen Elves as well.
Oh yeah.
We
the
did
sand
some
elf.
revamp of Fallen Elves and Orcs at the beginning of this year that you should absolutely check out because it's really cool. I love the Polynesian Orcs. I think they're amazing. Yeah, that's my favorite bit that we've added.
For me, it's the revamp of the Fallen Elves, and spreading them out, change their lore a little bit, a bit of a retcon. So now we have like Frost Elves, Sand Elves, or Golden Elves, the Shadow or Faring Elves,
Mist elves.
the Mist Elves. Yeah, so we've got a bunch of different Fallen Elf archetypes. So you don't just have to play like the typical grey-skinned Faring Elf. You could play like a Fallen Elf from Frail who's got very golden or yellowy kind of skin. Or you could play like the Snow Elf or Frost Elf from the Bitter North who's got that very white skin. They're still all Fallen Elves. They've still got the same like character in terms of their realness and sorceress kind of backgrounds, but they've just come from very diverse regions.
Their magical blood mutates them to better survive, whereas your standard elf doesn't have
Also,
that
just
mutation.
real quick, Lynn mentioned that Des had a good question on Magic and Geth, but I think it's disappeared in the questions.
I
Des,
think
could you resend
I
that?
remember it.
Yeah.
I remember what it was.
We'll finish this question.
Okay.
Anyway.
Cool. I really like that elves are definitely dark elves now, and fallen elves now. That just makes me happy. As someone who used to play a snow elf.
Yeah, they were a good addition. Yeah, there's actually a fair bit more player-inspired additions than people might think. I mean, hell, even the Kraken itself, one of the first deities, is a player edition. But yeah, my favorite newer bit of lore that we threw in was defining the Schaefer rule of the Rue clans. The idea that they're still matriarchal druids, but they're more like Boudica, like badass warrior sorcerers, and so even with the roving bands, so like a Thadian column might stop a bunch of traveling Rue, expecting that they'll have this decrepit old like seer leading the band, only to find this heavily woad tattooed badass queen sort of leading them. And she's like, "Oh, I knew you were coming from miles away because the birds told me," and you know, that kind of stuff. I just think that's a cool little bit of something original for the way they operate, going back to the Celt roots as opposed to the Romani stylings.
Yeah, I really Chris and I earlier. How long ago was it? Like earlier this year or something?
1,000 years ago, at least.
Yeah. Chris and I sat down at one point, and we both just went through the wiki together. And so I don't like the major additions, like the changes to Fallen Elves and everything we've already gone through, but I just really like how much we've expanded on stuff that was previously very lacking, I think. Like if before you'd go through the each page for each of the realms, and Arcos would have like all this stuff and Thadia would have all this stuff, but there was like almost nothing for some of the other things like the Crosslands, which is still pretty minimal, but yeah, like the Crosslands and Loci and all these other ones.
Like a short paragraph.
Yeah, I just really like that we have expanded on it, and like how there's, you know, each page has its own little brief history and everything. I just like that in general we have expanded and filled out things that I think were just not balanced with everything else.
Because we tried to keep things as sort of open and nebulous for people to add their own interpretations, but over the years people have asked us for more definitive answers, and so
we left it too vague.
yeah, and it's a learning curve. You got to remember we don't know what we're doing either.
We're making it up as we go.
I like that the descriptions of the realms are open enough that you can reasonably play someone from anywhere in like your common universes in our lore, but there's a lot of timelines that you can, and like important moments in history for those realms that you can easily slot your character into and possibly have been part of one of those earlier histories.
Read the Faraday War, or however you say it.
Read the timelines in all the realms and their lore. Chris and Addie have put in a lot of effort.
Yeah, read the Faraday War. So proud of that one.
So that that is like a Chris Price masterpiece right there. But the Faraday War, even I didn't super know this until I saw it all written down. But the Faraday War really, really shaped how Scy'kadia is today. Like it is the cause of, you know, the birth of Krakenreach being its own thing, and like it shaped like the realms that we have, you know, today. You know what I mean when I say today, but it really did. It's one of those things that like had a huge impact over how all of our lore, all of the current stuff that affects our characters has been affected by this major event. So 100% go to the wiki, check out our I might link it in as a comment actually. I'll go and But yeah, super, super cool.
Read it because it probably impacts your character in some way.
Yeah, and it was only something like 70 years ago. Like basically our character, like human characters, our grandparents would have been born at the end of the war, you know. So it's still repercussions still felt. Like half the reason that Arcos and Thadia aren't at war with each other right now is because they're still rebuilding from the undead horror that, you know, thrashed at them for 100-something years. Yeah. Hey, there we go.
You remember it, probably.
Yeah, let's get to Dez's question before we forget.
Yes.
Yeah.
How does magic work in Geth, and what happens if people push it too far? The Fallen Elves.
Yeah.
That's a big one. Yeah. Jove's Silver Eyes. His mage mutation, that he can't hide that he's angry anymore because his eyes mutate. Like that's a mage burn.
So I am also going to link the page on the wiki page on magic because it does touch on that.
Yeah.
But
mage
feel
burns
free to
are a big one.
Yeah. It's
especially
honestly
if you've used dark magic.
Yeah. The magic system that we've got is heavily influenced by. I grew up with Warhammer Fantasy and Warhammer 40k, and magic in that is very much sort of like a mirror realm to reality. We don't take that approach. We take it's an energy that is alive and living through everything. So it's basically underneath the surface of the world there is a layer of energy that thinks.
like force.
Yeah, it is a lot like that. But the thing is, it doesn't like to be told what to do. And so over the years, there have been whole realms that have tried to like conquer magic, like even the Wefteril themselves. And what it did is it birthed ruin. Like magic went crazy and made demons and everything like that. So basically, when wizards use sorcery, they have to be like, the idea of using spells is it's a subtle, tried and tested method to cast a particular effect. And if you go a little bit too hard, if you try to overreach, if you're a bit too brutal with the way that you use sorcery, you can almost feel the energy realize you're doing that to it, and it sort of bucks the way that a horse will try to get off a rider it doesn't like. And that instead of getting a hoof to the head, you get mutations, your fingers rot off, in Job's case, forevermore, like when he's in a state of anger, he cannot hide it because his eyes start to glow. And I imagine that if that goes further, like he would actually feel pains shooting through them and things like that. So it's a horrible thing if you overreach.
A great example of what happens if you use magic too much was a few games ago when we had a time loop.
Yeah.
That's a thing. That was some big boy exploitation of magic by our
Thundered.
wonderful ex-Scy'kadia variant.
R.I.P.
Stuff like that.
Also,
Crazy
with our
things.
rituals in-game, when you find a ritual, it very rarely screws up because I've noticed most people, when they see a ritual happening, would rather see it take place than try to interrupt it. But if a ritual is interrupted, there's the penalty at the very bottom of the ritual. And a lot of it is things like if you're trying to create a small army of zombies, if you screw it up, then it suddenly says like, you are now poisoned until the admins decide that you're not poisoned anymore. Or it might say something like if you're trying to, what was it? There was one that was like about trying to use the wind to repel arrows. And it was something like, if you successfully cast the spell, then arrows and daggers don't deal any damage to you because the wind deflects them at the last second. But if you fail the spell, or if you do it wrong, or if someone interrupts, the magic will it'll say something like, now arrows deal 5 damage to you because the wind is actually directing them to your vital points.
Oh, yeah. Arcane Winds.
Yeah.
I remember that one.
Yeah.
If anyone remembers at the Weekender when I let off a little explosion of magic and all the shifters shifted, that sort of thing. When magic backfires on you because it doesn't like what you're doing.
Yeah. So Tiana says, I know Shadow has their champion quests. What kind of quest do the other camps run for their characters to pursue? Find out in character, basically.
Find out in character.
Yeah, like we
character.
do have quests and stuff for you to do. The best way for you to figure out what that is to come up and say, hey, give me a quest.
Yeah, say, hello, give me a quest, or if you want to find out specific, like, camp quest, say, like, hi, is there a way that I can prove myself to this camp, or to my god, or etc., etc., and the admin will probably go, yeah, here's a quest that I prepared earlier.
Yeah.
A big thing with the deific camps, those two, is that they are, despite impressions, especially around Shadow, they are often smaller and often outnumbered. And so a big part of adding champions with minor boons, I mean, again, remember, a champion isn't like a 20 hit point killing machine. It's just someone who has a little bonus on top for doing like heaps of objectives over the course of months. But those champions sort of even the playing field a little bit. Like I very rarely will do champion stuff in my township purely because I've got the most people on average. And so we don't need it. So
and my champion boons come in the form of potions and shiny things.
Yeah.
And also champions can be challenged and stuff.
Yeah.
Like they're not necessarily going to have that forever. And it's also about how they use their boons as well.
Yeah. Although I do have a champion of Volcestus in my team at the moment because he did a bunch of really cool shit over the weekender and honestly earned it. So, but again, it's a small boon. You wouldn't even know until he uses it. Yeah.
So Hodge has something that we've probably already accidentally answered in our rambling. Do you guys have a favorite battle from either Scycadia's history and or one that you've participated in at Larp? So we've already ranted about the Faraday War quite a bit.
Yeah. My favorite battle is actually something I was going to touch on my lore-specific stream sometime soon, but it's Ratrakanos, the Emerald Tyrant, the biggest green dragon in the history, and it's all there in the Sulphur Isles page, I believe, versus Parakleon, our version of Hercules. And you'll see there's a particular sci-fi action movie that we were inspired by when we were writing it, and it's real silly, but it's just so cool. Just the muddied up twin spear, like muscled psychopath versus the biggest green dragon ever, and it's just that's That's my favorite.
It has
This
to
is so
be
dumb.
a Faraday War one where they tried to raise some undead dragons and the actual dragons went, no.
The Battle of Glass.
Battle of
Yeah.
Glass. They just went and got stomped by dragons who were like, oh, no, that's not happening. Okay.
Yeah.
So
Back
Kathy asks, if you are under the age of 16, can you still become an assassin or something along those lines? Yeah, absolutely. Our limit on combat is 13 and over. So you have to be at least 13 years old to participate in combat. And we do have assassin as a tier that you can choose as a combatant. So 100%. Our only limitations on younger characters and younger players are really obvious things about, not role playing things like romance and stuff with adult characters and adult players, because that's a bit weird. Just a little, no, it's a lot weird.
Yeah.
But yeah, just that's really our only limitation on younger characters. Just be
Role playing
appropriate with it.
alcohol and drugs and stuff.
Yeah. Just be age appropriate. And murder is for any age.
Yeah. Honestly,
True.
start them young, I say.
Yep.
And as to
Phil,
that as well, it goes sort of in the opposite direction too. Just a point that we had to add into the rules is that if you are an adult, you also don't role play like a minor, because it just comes across as creepy. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter your intent; it comes across as creepy.
yes.
Yeah.
Phil
So-
asked, if you played an elf before the rewrite, can you change your elf type? I would say the only situation you could do that is if you were playing a fallen elf already and wanted to switch to one of the new versions of fallen elves. If you're a normal elf, then go
Yeah,
get
so
yourself
we
corrupted.
still have normal
Go
elf
have a
and
corruption arc.
fallen elf, or like high elf and fallen elf. We still have
Yeah.
those as separate species. But yeah, if you were already playing one of these and you want to branch into one of the new ones, just send us an email to let us know that the change is happening. So it's not like suddenly you're rocking up in an entirely different costume and it's like, no, I'm still the same character. Just let us know that you're doing it, and we'll be like, sweet. And then
They haven't changed overly much. I mean,
No.
we always said that fallen elves, or as we used to call them, dark elves, they didn't have to be grey skinned. They could be different with arcane tattoos or whatever. So all we've done is we've just added a few extra references to things that other players have come up with, like the golden skinned desert elves and things like that. So yeah, your character won't have changed that much, really. It's just in the way that we speak about them. And a lot of that is just based on
There are cabals of fallen elves that live around in the world that are indistinguishable from normal elves. Because
especially
they live
the
in
old ones.
yeah,
Like the really old fallen elves, because the fallen elves have only been they only sort of fled in the year 77 from their main homes and whatever. So they're not like 1,000-year-old culture. They're actually quite young by elf standards. So there are still elves alive that just look like regular elves.
Shadow has one.
Yeah.
So Liasha, is that how I pronounce it?
I think,
Alicia?
yeah, I
Liasha?
think it's saying Alicia.
Please spell your
Phonetically.
your phonetic pronunciation so I don't be stupid. That brings up a point. Civilian children can and have stolen plot props from camps. How do we as players help protect those props if they're important to us? I know we cannot engage in combat, but can we freeze them to prevent the theft? So, the thing with any civilian character, regardless of age, what they should be doing is, if they are being, you can threaten them. You can't actually hit them, but you can threaten to hit them, and they should. What's the actual wording that we have in the doc?
Yeah.
But essentially, they should
Power. That's it.
power. They should give up the objective, because otherwise, yeah, that's way too OP. So that is in our civilian rules, that if because otherwise it would just be like, ha ha ha, you're not allowed to touch me and I have this thing, what you going to do about it?
Children that
not
age
great.
should also have a parent or guardian with them at
Yes.
all times. And so you can always address the parent or guardian as well, because the kid might not understand. If we're talking like 4 or 5 year olds, which we have had, then yeah, you basically just want to turn to the parent and just gently say, oh, we actually need that prop. And usually the parent will go, give it back, you know?
Leisha.
Leisha. Perfect. Thank
I
you.
was like,
So the other thing with civilians, whilst you can't engage them in combat, you can't start tossing spells at them. And freeze is a combat spell because it starts a combat encounter as soon as you freeze someone.
you're throwing an object at a child.
Yeah.
When it gets down
You can
to it.
still totally use social spells on them. If you have charm, you can walk up and say, hey, you want to give me that object now, charm, and that will work. Like, they can still be under the effects of spells. You just can't hit them with a combat spell. Yeah, it's like social spells only. And I know we don't have a description of them yet, and that's something that once we eventually get around to having our meeting on magic that we want to have, that we wanted to have for the last year,
It's
we
been
might.
in the works for like 2 years of having a discussion about magic.
We had a bit of a one while we were away down in the snow about splitting up magic into 2 distinct categories of combat spells and social spells, but it's something we haven't sort of discussed as a team yet, and we'll get around to that soon, TM.
Tiana, on that question, saying that you've heard some children offer to go and get things because they can't be touched. Again, that's something that we have heard from civilians in general, and a lot of it is just getting the community used to the limitations of what they can and can't do. And if a kid does go off and offer that, the people who are being offered should say to the kid, oh, look, that's really not within the spirit of the game. You know, you shouldn't say, yeah, absolutely. It's the same as if someone is improperly chanting with healing. Like, you shouldn't accept it even if they're healing you. You should be the one to educate and say, oh, no offense, but you really should slow down your chant. And if they just keep doing it, then just ignore them. You know, same with the kid. If they go, oh, go get this thing, and you go, no, it's not, that's not appropriate. If they then go and get it anyway, you just go, put it back. I'm not accepting that. And eventually they'll learn that they're not going to get what they want out of doing that. Same for the adults, you know, if civilians do it, or even if combatants start behaving in a way around civilians that they shouldn't, the civilians should be well within their rights to say that's not how it works. And if they keep doing it, again, come to us and we'll educate.
Yeah, as always, if there is a genuine issue that isn't going to be solved by a gentle reminder in character, just bring it to one of us.
Or an arbiter.
Or an arbiter, yes.
Yeah.
All right.
Cast high society spells, casting with your pinky out.
How I should cast. I shouldn't point at people, I should.
Lynn asks, with regards to character age, can I be from the time of Waking Gods or something? Or do I need to have a more realistic age?
I'm going to leave that one to Christopher.
Don't be Coral.
I rant about this sometimes, so I'll try to keep it short. Don't make a character who is, you know, a million years old, because they would have far more experience than a level 1 character. They would know more. They would have more abilities. It makes no sense to be a level 1, you know, rogue if you are 3,000 years old. So not only does it feel weird, but also, you know, like you're taking it upon yourself to say, I can make up 3,000 years of history in someone else's setting. And that's just, as far as, like, if I went into someone else's setting, I wouldn't do that. I'd want to make a character who is living in the here and now. And we've also said that even for things like elves, I mean, elementari and undead are maybe the one thing that could potentially be that ancient. But also, yeah, even then, it's just...
It doesn't.
If you're making your character more than like 300 years old, and they don't have like amnesia and are now like really not smart anymore, why are they here?
Just play someone with dementia. Hey, Becky.
Yeah, it's like that question from way earlier about, you know, can player characters go and set up this town again? It, like, technically, yes, you can, but it doesn't make sense. It doesn't mesh with... it makes the real separation between the game mechanics and the flavor text, I guess. What am I trying to say? I need help. My brain isn't working.
Yeah, it's making sense.
Yeah. There's just this real disconnect, and it doesn't really make sense for you just in character. Doesn't super make sense. And that being said, I've reminded myself of a question that I sometimes get asked that I would like to answer in a Q&A, even though no one asked it here. And that is, can, for example, with armor, can a healer like physically wear more armor and just not have it count as more armor? I would say no, just because it doesn't make sense in character, and it's you know a bit misleading for the people around you as well, because we do say only count your own hit points because you never know how many hit points others have, but people are going to look at someone wearing a lot of armor and be like, oh, they're a tough kind of thing. It just, like, while you as a player can physically wear lots of armor, I just don't recommend you do it in character because it just doesn't make sense.
If you have 3 hit points, dress like it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's the same with the age of the character. If you're playing someone who should be, they have 8,000 years of combat experience, and you're a level 1 warrior, people are just going to look at that and go, well, you're not what you say you are, so you must be lying.
Okay. I've thought of how I want to word it. I've thought of how I want to say it. So it's really jarring from a roleplay perspective. And because our games, compared to a lot of other LARPs around that are very much battle games and everything, because our games are so roleplay heavy and so roleplay focused, it even though mechanically it doesn't super affect anything, because the roleplay of it just doesn't make sense. It's I've lost it again. I'm dead. My brain's dead. I need more coffee. But it just doesn't make sense roleplay wise, and because we have a lot of roleplay, we strongly encourage you do things that make sense roleplay wise.
The only time I'd encourage playing an older character is when they're senile or something, because that's a lot of fun. But otherwise, just don't.
And again, you want to be respectful if you're going to play a
game.
character
Thank you, Tiana.
a little
Breaks
bit
the flow of the game.
So next question.
So Phil's just asked, in regards to armor, is there a reason that 6 zones of light doesn't count? It does. Yeah, if you wear 6 zones of like a light armor, for example, leather or a gambeson or something, it can count as medium armor. Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
It should be like a rigid armor. We typically have done it like on a case by case basis.
There was an undead character called Albrecht who did that to benefit from medium armor, and he was basically it was thick black, like studded leather, full bodysuit. Like it looked like something out of World of Warcraft, plus the solid like skull plated.
The armor Galanath wears is leather, but it counts as medium because it's like thick, rigid leather armor.
It covers most of him.
Boy.
Yeah. So it'd be on a case by case basis. It'd need to be actual like armor grade leather, not just your typical like, hey, I've got these braces, and whatever. So you just it'd be on a case by case basis. We'd assess it, but as a general rule, yes, you could have 6 points of leather armor.
I'm pretty sure we have that in the rules where it says.
Yeah.
We might have added it. I know it never used to be in the rules.
Yeah, it definitely didn't used to be. I don't know if.
Now I'm concerned because I could have sworn it was in the rules. Hang on, let me check.
While we're looking, question from I'm horrible at pronunciation. I think it's Shawnshi.
Yeah, please phonetically spell your name.
I'm sorry.
I love those Irish-sounding names.
Yeah, it's Irish, but I'm not good at Irish. says that they also have a question about ages. How do half-elves calculate equivalent ages? It was explained for full elves, but couldn't find that info for half-elves.
Depends
Perhaps
if
our
they were
resident
raised.
half-elf player could... Well, previously half-elf player, Becky?
I always played it as it depends who they were raised by. If they were raised by humans, then they age like a human until they're an adult, and then obviously 500 odd years. If they were raised by elves, then they age like elves. Like when I was playing Mayrin, she was a half elf, but she was 18 when I finished playing her. So, and she was an 18-year-old as human standards. But it also depends where they were raised and how it kind of works. And if you want to play more into the elf side of them or the human side of them.
Yeah.
I found the thing about
in old D&D, like 3rd edition, half elves were described as being adults at around about like 70 or something. But with newer editions, they just age at the same rate as humans and then just stop aging up until they're like 400 years old or something. And so we've kind of gone down that basic route. I mean, a lot of our even if they're called cambions, for example, you could say that our cambions are very much like tieflings, or same with like Nephilim and what they would call... what do they call them in D&D now? Aasimar, that's it. Yeah. So if it's not described in the wiki, you can always fall back on 5th edition D&D for a general idea. But yeah, exactly what was said. If they're living in a human culture, they'll generally be more human. If not, then not so much.
Yeah, it depends on the flavor of half elf you're going for, basically.
Also, if you're growing up in somewhere like Sindorian, which is like time and that works different because it is very elven magic or whatever, then yeah, they might spend their childhood there for like 100 years and wouldn't really know any different. Yeah.
Characters wearing thick, inflexible leather or bone on at least 6 locations may count themselves as wearing medium armor, but only if their tiers allow them to wear medium armor in the first place, is what the core rules.
We did add it. Okay.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure if we added that or not.
Yeah. Alrighty. Next question.
Ornaki. That's a cool way to pronounce it.
Ornaki. Nice.
Lynn asks, can you give us an overview of how possession works in Scy'kadia, and can the average player just decide that they'll be possessed by a god, naga, full demon, or full celestial? No.
It's the big one.
Yeah, we've had players play themselves as being possessed by a ghost or a demon in the past. And if it's like a lesser demon or something, that's never had a big impact on plot. But as for like a naga or a god, I mean, what makes you so special? You know.
Same thing as going as playing like the son of a naga or the son of a god or daughter of a god. It doesn't exist. The gods and the naga themselves wouldn't like lower themselves to have children with a mortal.
And they can't physically enter the real world because they're too damn powerful. Yeah.
So if you are a cambion, it's generally a lesser demon that's done the nasty.
Yeah, and those of you who have been around for a bit have seen demon possessions as like major plot points in games. They're not even like fairly lesser demons are still like a big threat and everything, and are still pretty powerful, and are not. It's just not appropriate for a character at the power level of a player character. Ha! You're all plebs. Suck it up. That's not what I'm trying to say, but that is what it sounds like I'm saying. But I want to clarify that you are all very wonderful. No, it's just it'd make the game really unbalanced if we had, and it makes those sorts of plot lines less important when we do run them, because then it's like, oh well, we had a demon possession last week, what's the point of that kind of thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And demon possessions early on, when we first started running, where players would just decide they were possessed, in a lot of those cases, it just came across as a split personality. It didn't really come across as genuinely like demonic empowerment, because you can't just decide to give yourself cool powers. But yeah, it's again, it came across more as the split personality trope. And as for someone mentioned Galanath's recent possessions, they were all plot based. They came about because of actions that were taken by characters, and not necessarily Galanath himself.
Also,
so, that's appropriate.
Galanath's probably not feeling too hot.
He's,
No.
he's right.
There's some stuff that's going to be happening in next game with Galanath, so he'll find out.
My character was possessed thanks to a certain pair of gauntlets.
So there's a follow-up question from Michael about what about half races that don't include humans, like half orc, half dwarf? As a general rule, they don't exist. There's just something about the human genes that work well and adapt that mix with other races. So typically, other races like half orc and half dwarf together, or half orc and a half elf, nothing ever really comes from the union of those two races. It's typically only half human, half other race that sort of seems to work.
And even then, it's really just it's humans, elves, and orcs for whatever reason can interbreed. Whereas, and again, this is very much a D&D staple that dwarves don't interbreed with anything but dwarves. Orcs and goblins don't interbreed, for example. It's just humans, elves, and dwarves. And then any other mixed thing like shifters, that's based on a blood curse, not breeding.
You could have a half orc, like half human, half orc, if you wanted to play a half orc in the game. So specifically, if you wanted to play like an islander orc, they're probably the more friendly of all the orcs.
There's the little town of Felcogue, or well, again, they don't call themselves that, but they have a fair few half orcs in their population as well, which I quite like. They're very surly looking, even though they're idiots.
We've caught up again, guys.
We caught up again. Caleb asks, my character was possessed by a demon at the weekend, thanks to a certain pair of gauntlets. Are there any kind of effects that he might feel after the fact, apart from possibly some PTSD?
Have you ever had evil in you before?
Find out if there's anything, you'll find out in character. Otherwise, just roleplay some. Oh, golly, that felt bad.
Yeah, like bad nightmares, uncertainty as to whether or not you really are just alone now, or whether there's something still lingering. Like, there's heaps of opportunities for the roleplay, but there's no hard and fast mechanic, I don't believe.
Hodge has a question.
Comment. Sorry, real quick. Michael's comment, a half-orc named Hawk killed me.
I love it. That's so good.
Hawk.
A half-orc. So Nathan had a question, basically it was covered earlier, but in a conversation you had in game about a character convinced they were about to imprint with a baby dragon. If theirs was the first face they saw when it hatched, they'd raise it as a friend/pet. Dragons don't work that way. They have a racial memory and a racial, they're a spirit, I guess you will. Yeah. So new ones come out of the egg evil.
Yeah, like they
bite you face off.
It says in the lore that they develop a really cunning, wicked sentience after a few hundred years, like when they become adults. So, we had a baby dragon called Sparky that was carried around by some light camp characters for a while, and he never turned on them or attacked them, but it's still an aggressive reptilian thing. It's not a cute little cat. And then after a few hundred years, assuming those characters were still alive, Sparky would have hands down become a sinister, probably power-hungry megalomaniac, and would have either manipulated them into serving it or eaten them.
They're not something you can pet, as they can raise and train and treat as your own. They're still a wild animal.
Yeah, we try to avoid races being inherently evil in any way. Dragons are the exception. Yeah, dragons are the creatures of your nightmares, and save the Naga, possibly, they're just as bad as imagine dragons as a Naga. You can't make a Naga good. You can't change him.
No. It's the reason why Pandora wanted those eggs, to seal them away so no one could touch them.
You can't change him. He's not going to become good for you. Just leave.
That said, you can have a character who thinks otherwise.
Oh yeah.
You're wrong.
Be aware that that character will probably end up dead.
Yes.
Yeah. Which is, there's nothing wrong
if that's
with
your vibe, do it.
Yeah, like you can
Well,
play a
like
character
that.
who's 100% convinced that there's good dragons out there, and that's a cool motivation to have.
Gaffy said this isn't a dragon-based rom-com.
Good lord.
Oh, we just got a really good question from Joel. How important is the marriage between game mechanics and narrative to the overall experience of Scy'kadia? From the admin perspective, do you try and ensure that narrative developments for players are reflected in the mechanics that they can feel the effects of? So I don't super know what you mean by the second part of that question, but we do sometimes like make up a mechanic or a boon or an ability as a reward or a penalty for certain roleplay actions. We absolutely do that.
I think the second part was like if a character has participated in like an important plot point or a ritual or something, is that always going to be reflected mechanically? And the answer is not always, but most of the time. If we can find a way to reflect that mechanically, like for example, Bumbleshins ended up in a goat as his replacement heart for the Weekender, so he had a bit of he now I think can only be resurrected in the same way Elementari can, because he's got an Elementari for a heart. So like we will try to reflect narrative developments in mechanics, but that being said, narrative for us is generally more important than mechanics, and we will bend and change them to further the story.
Yeah, a lot of our mechanics outside of very basic combat and character creation were actually added to the system over the last few years to ensure that when people are engaging in a narrative or roleplay sense, that they can't just overpower people, it's trying to sort of level the playing field. Like our rules for torture and crippled limbs and whatnot were added purely because players were role-playing torture scenes way too much. And it was, essentially just, it was hamstringing, sometimes literally, your opponents and not really giving them any way to say, oh, but the mechanics don't let you do this. It was, so we added that to, again, not to stop people from doing it, but to make sure that there was some level of equality in the system, that you couldn't just role play your way to a win, necessarily in that fashion. In other ways, like diplomacy, absolutely great, cool. But yeah, there were some things where the mechanics needed to streamline
for the roleplay that was happening.
Yeah, so in a sense, yes, roleplay does impact the mechanics and can actually change the way that the game operates moving forward. But a lot of the time, it's more a case of ensuring fair play and sportsmanship than it is really wanting to rely on mechanics for everything. I mean, as
for the first part of your question, how important is the marriage between game mechanics and narrative to the overall experience of Scy'kadia? I think about it, I don't know, I can't speak for everyone here, but I think about it in a sense that the mechanics are there to support the roleplay. The mechanics are there so that when we are... the mechanics exist as like a way for us to represent what we want to roleplay at games. So the obvious example is magic. We are not actually magical, so we've made mechanics for having an out of character way to represent that, if that makes sense. So Scy'kadia touched on this earlier, but we are a very roleplay heavy Larp. We have this really big focus on roleplay, and we say everywhere, we say, in the core rules, on the wiki, at new player training, we say that the most important thing is the story. that what we're trying to do is tell a good story. That's why, hits to the hands and feet don't count as hits, because it's not a story a good story that's being told, if that makes sense.
Yep. Agree.
Yeah, I'll ask the question. If your character is silenced but has an item that allows them to cast without a chance, such as a familiar, can they still cast the head spell?
I love that. Can we
Yeah.
say yes to that? I love that. That's
yes,
awesome.
it's actually mechanically correct.
Yeah, that's so cool.
Silence stops you from talking and chanting,
Yes,
but
so-
you're still allowed to call effects. So if you have the ability to sneak attack someone and you're silenced, you would still call sneak attack because those calls aren't in character. That's an out of character call to let a player know the nobility you're using on them. Likewise, when you're tossing a fireball, when you call damage, that's not you literally saying in character damage. That's you letting the people know that you're casting damage. So if you have the ability to cast without chanting, then yes, you can still cast that spell. You'd still call the out of character name of the spell, and the ability would go off as normal.
Are there any plans for releasing any lore-related media or videos for deep dives on the realms of Scy'kadia in the future?
That would be awesome. I think that's a fantastic idea. I think it would really just come down to if we have time to.
Yeah, my next little streamy thing, because I've gotten the bug, like I said, I really like interacting with you guys like this. I was planning on going through each of the realms and just talking about a particular little story chunk that I quite like, including some of the Lost Realms and including some character additions as well. Like I really wanted to tell people, speaking of the 37th, what Valar is, and some of the deities that players have come up with, and just that sort of stuff. I was going to keep it to like an hour, so I wasn't gonna rabble on too much about it. But yeah, I'd love to do more focus on realms, because again, people might read a little bit of the wiki to get started and then just forget to go back to it. And there's a ton of really cool stuff now. So.
On a similar but slightly unrelated note, I've been thinking of doing a video or a stream of designing character makeup. Specifically focusing on makeup for a character, because if in case you don't already know this about me, but I am a professionally trained makeup artist for theatre and film. So I am literally trained in designing makeup for a character, to represent a character. So if you are interested in me doing a breakdown of how to design makeup with a character in mind, rather than just like coming up with something that looks cool, which is still totally valid and awesome, just let me know if that's something you're keen on.
I'm keen on it.
Thinking about, yeah.
Well,
Oh no.
no. Becky's internet.
Oh no!
What
did you
back?
say, Becky? You're back, but what did you say?
If anyone's interested in me doing a costuming live stream, I know an awful lot about costuming. I've been studying it for 4 years now. Just how to build a costume from the base up. I'm happy to share the information.
I was
We
just
are
also
nerds
going to
and
say,
want to nerd out with you.
should we maybe say cut off for questions because it's 1:55?
Yep. There's a good question here from Maddie I'd like to answer.
Yep.
How many times has the plot been planned for the game and instead of going completely off the rails and into something it wasn't planned for?
Almost every single game.
The plots rarely ever survive the characters.
No plan survives first contact.
The time loop game, the second part of that second game, about halfway through, it went off into the realm of the unknown, and we're making it up on the fly.
Yep. So the way that we run games is each of us will take a turn to write the main plot. So whenever it's my turn to write a plot, I always try to make sure that there's I have some potential rewards or some potential penalties in place for the multiple different ways that it could go. I intentionally write them in a way that it could go here or here or here or here. And even then, it'll be like something that I didn't even plan for will happen, and I'll have to make something up on the spot.
Yeah.
Oh, it suddenly got very silent.
Lynn has a good question around Zombify. Does anyone want to have a fun play at Zombify?
Sure, I'll give it a crack. Lynn asks to explain how Zombify works and how to RP being zombified. So hopefully everyone knows that Zombify means that you are raised as a zombie. You get a command from the caster that is either defend the caster, stand still, or go and fight that specific person. You move by walking. You have 3 hit points, and you can hit people with your weapon, and that's it. That's what you can do as a zombie. It's different to bind. When you're bound, you have the full range of your abilities. As a zombie, you can just hit people. But
You
RP
can shoot.
being a zombie.
You can shoot as a zombie. You just can't.
Oh yeah,
because you can't speak.
yeah. Shoot.
Yeah.
I mean, shooting. I assume counts as weapon.
Yeah.
So,
damage.
RP wise, as a zombie, feel free to ham it up and like shamble if you want, and to gurgle and moan and do what you do to show off that you're a zombie. You do still have a fight at your normal ability, so don't just sort of half-heartedly swing at someone while moaning. Actually put some effort into the fight, like someone's taken the time and effort to raise you as a zombie. And using their ability on you. So don't sort of waste their opportunity and waste their role-playing experience by just sort of walking into someone without actually attacking and just hoping to get taken out.
Yeah. So you roleplay as a zombie,
There
and you
is-
are slowed, but
yeah.
you fight at your full capabilities.
Yeah. You walk.
There is nothing
But
more
you can
disappointing
still
as a
fight.
necromancer than creating a zombie, telling them to attack something, and they walk slowly and then stop to chat to their friend, and then dawdle around until someone dispels them. That's not fun. No one has
Yeah.
fun there. You're not
And-
having fun there. It's just not a good time for anyone if you're just gonna
That's
ignore your objective as a zombie.
yeah. That's an
Mind.
important note with all mind control spells being zombify, charm, and bind. Don't go around going, oh, I've got to do this thing. I won't remember needing to do this thing. This isn't something I'd normally do, but I'm going to go do it. And, really imply that someone should dispel you. You're still unless you're zombified and you need to act like a zombie, especially for charm and bind, you should be acting completely normal.
And real quick, Michael, zombie can only just fight with their weapons, not cast spells and stuff. They're an animated puppet rather than a
Also, keeping in mind, if you've been zombified and you get hit by dispel, yes, you're not a zombie anymore, but you're also out of action.
Yeah. Actually, on Michael's point, there are quite a few rules where we've tried to design things as foolproof as humanly possible, but again, humans are clever and will always find a way to nuance their way around anything that we write. So instead of writing, a 15-page monologue about what the limitations of Zombify are, we give hard and fast rules. It's a little bit like. An example of people nuancing their way around something was over the weekender, we had said that if you capture the fort, it's only the person at the very heart of the fort who gets the reward. But someone then read a piece of reward and decided that because of the wording of it, that it applied to everyone, despite the fact that we had already said it only applies to you. So we had 15 or 16 people wandering around with an upgrade that wasn't intended for them. As a player, if you do find a rule that, in the moment doesn't, you think to yourself, okay, what are the total limitations here? Think about the implication, like what's implied by the rule. Like, is a zombie, and it's saying they're slow, they're dumb, they can't talk properly. Think to yourself, well, okay, is the intention here that they should be able to still do complex tasks like casting spells and healing? Or is the implication here clearly that they are a mindless fighting machine? And usually the simplest answer is the right one. Okay, you don't need to think too hard about it.
Sammy raises a point about zombifying. If you're a mage and you don't have any active, like, usable weapons, like in a game, like, so for instance, if you don't have any weapons on you that can swing an attack, if you get zombified, and someone says attack that person, feel free as a zombie look at them and go, huh? Like, you can't
hold your
actually
hands
attack
up.
someone in game. You're like, I don't
Yeah,
have any weapons to
like-
attack them with.
And if they insist, I don't know, go up and just like growl in their ear or something.
Just growl.
Try to verbally intimidate them being a zombie, but you can't
Yeah.
obviously attack them without any weapons.
Yes.
Zombifying a mage who has no actual weapons apart from magic, yeah, it's pretty useless.
That's when you use bind.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And we did have a question from Hodge related to
Yes.
bind is, can you bind somebody to use their bind ability to bind another player? Yeah.
Yes.
Hell
I
yeah.
mean, I don't see why you would do
I've
it.
done it a lot.
Bindception.
It just seems like a waste of a bind, but sure. If you want to get that person to waste their, I mean,
If you can bind someone to bind someone else who knows bind to bind someone else, you can get like a big bind chain going. But it'd be useless, but
I
funny. But still
would
useful.
love
Yeah.
to see a bind chain, and then like they go around doing like the, I don't know, the Macarena or something, or like they have a conga line of like the person in front is the original mage, and then everyone else is like a chain of bound people, and they just run it. That would be so funny to me.
And
I have a new role.
Caleb is also right. For the sake of people's roleplay knowledge, raising a zombie doesn't actually represent turning them into a corpse. It's more of a hypnosis situation. So, the only time that you are actually creating a literal flesh-eating zombie is if the character was dead, not out of action, which is a very rare occurrence, but always fun when it does
Different
happen.
rules in the spell for that.
Yeah.
Yep, so we will finish off there because we do have other stuff to do, other stuff to get to. Thank you all so much for tuning in, for asking all these questions. It has been a lot of fun. It doesn't feel like it's been 2 hours. It feels like it's just been 10 minutes because we've just been going. We might put up a bonus Q&A thread just as a comment thing for questions that we didn't get to, questions that you had but we're finishing up now so you didn't get to ask. And we will try and get to them, but like we said, we do have other stuff to get to.
I'm going to go turn off this stream.
yeah. Thank
All
you,
right,
everyone.
thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Goodbye.